Hello, I imagine you're not totally surprised that Jose Mourinho has been sacked. It's the third year, despite the fact that it will cost about £24 million to pay him off. There were enough indications that things were not working. You could see it on the pitch, of course. You could see it in the explanations that he was giving after games. You could see it in the reaction of players. You could see it in players not improving. You could see it on Pogba being on the bench. By the way, a lot of those things he went through in the third season as well at other clubs. What I mean by that is that he knows he shouldn't and cannot be longer than 2.5 years, say, in a club because of his methodology. It's all about finding the best out of people from a regime of, I wouldn't call it terror, but I will call it tension. He wants confrontation to be one of the bases of the improvement of players. That's why he wants players that are mature. He wants players that can deal with that. He realized very quickly, for instance, that John Terry and Lampard were that kind of players. So he was going to make them the hardcore of the Chelsea team. In fact, let me tell you a story of how he works and why, perhaps right now, with the type of players that we've got, in the type of society that we've got, with the power that players have got, perhaps those things don't work anymore. In a party that he normally invited families, invited the wives as well. So he had his own moment to talk to the wives to get a little bit more in depth of what kind of players he had and some information that he could use later on. In one of those parties, he went to John Terry and said, "You should hear, this is in his first season, you should hear what Frank Lampard thinks of you," and walked away. And then he went to Frank Lampard and said, "My God, I've just spoken to John Terry what he thinks of you," and walked away. Of course, he started that fire and things became tense. With a couple of drinks, there were a shouting match between Lampard and Terry, and a lot of things came out of that. Obviously, on the back of it, and watching the whole thing, was Jose Mourinho, who at some point came in and said, "Oh, it was all a joke." But again, he got more information about what type of players they were, about what personalities he was dealing with, and he liked what he saw. And as I said, he made them leaders. You cannot do that anymore, I don't think. It's very difficult to find that kind of players that, of course, have got their own Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, whatever it is, in which they think they are the bosses, and coaches, managers are just to complement them, to help them develop. That's something that I don't think Jose Mourinho has adapted to. He doesn't want to adapt to that, and something that he's found, and that's why he's found the likes of Paul Pogba unmanageable. But Jose Mourinho, I feel there is a touch of obsolete about him, and that's his own decision because he's an intelligent manager. He knows how to win games, no doubt about it. Even though, as I read yesterday from Ken Early, for instance, the Irish writer and journalist, he does it because he seems to be in fear more than anybody else about losing. The fear of losing is something that hasn't got a long-term or cannot be part of a long-term project. The fear of losing is something you can use to motivate players for a while, but you have to give them much more. You have to give them answers. You have to give them layers that can be developed in training. While modern football has actually changed, and I don't think he's recognizing that or doesn't want to recognize that. I think what we're seeing is that attacking and defending is the same thing. There's a fluidity, which Paco Seirulo already at Barcelona told us a long time ago. Keep an eye or try to find out what Paco Seirulo philosophy is, because it has affected many from Pochettino to Pep Guardiola, etc. And the idea, of course, is that there's a fluidity of move. Depending how you attack, you will defend better because you will be well placed to defend when you lose the ball. That kind of thing, I don't think Jose Mourinho has applied to his football and has become a little bit stale. When the solution is Fellaini to come on in the second half against Liverpool, suggests that you have not put enough work to give your teams enough answers when things are not going your way. That's what I feel about Mourinho, and I have felt so since that day against PSG, in which Ibrahimovic got sent off in the Champions League. I think it was at Stamford Bridge. Chelsea had to win, if I'm not mistaken, and they were unable to attack a team that had 10 players. So he had prepared his own team to defend and attack with 10, because he always feels that referees and the way he plays football and his team plays football actually can affect the side and get one of his players sent off, as has happened often. He's prepared for that. Did not prepare for the team to attack against a side that had 10 men. From that moment on, I felt, what's going on? Why is he not applying new ideas? And as many have said, I just felt that, number one, his time at Real Madrid hurt him, because it was the first time that he went to a club in which he did not get his way. He did for a while, but then the likes of players that had won things themselves were actually saying, you know, not who are you, but they were saying, look, we won World Cups, so you shouldn't treat us like that. That broke down very quickly. As it always happens, of course, the third season was a disaster, and the same is happening here, of course. And what next for everybody, it's going to be a fascinating one. For Jose Mourinho, he knows he's got the admiration of Florentino Perez, who needs and likes shock treatments at Real Madrid. So do not discount the idea that even though Solari has got another year left in his contract, that Florentino Perez decides to go for Jose Mourinho. Pochettino, of course, everybody will link him to Manchester United. Let me tell you that in terms of young coaches, Manchester United have followed some of the best young coaches around before Jose Mourinho was approached. I won't say the names, but they had two in mind that decided not to go for, even though there were conversations with one of them, and decided to go for Jose Mourinho, despite the fact that two chairmen of two huge clubs in Europe said, don't do that. You won't go anywhere. Don't do that. Ed Woodward felt that he knew better, that Jose Mourinho was the man they needed at the time, and it's difficult when you have to take decisions to actually be brave enough and go for, you think, what it might be. With these two young coaches, you wonder, they haven't been at this level. Would they do the job? With Jose Mourinho, you think you're getting the safe decision, and basically Ed Woodward went for the safe hands, but failing to realise the context of the situation, the spark in the eyes of Jose Mourinho, and the fact that Jose have always wanted this job, but perhaps Manchester United needed something else. In hindsight, it's easier to say, but let's go back to what next. They should get a coach that actually understands what a club requires, not just the first team. It's not all about winning. It's about creating something that fans can buy as well and can be part of. Of course, Pochettino has done that at Tottenham Spurs, and you know that Daniel Levy has got the facility to not let him go. The contract says that there's no buyout clause, so if anybody wants to get Pochettino, they have to convince Daniel Levy. Not an easy task. I feel personally that Spurs and Pochettino have reached a point where they don't owe nothing to each other. Pochettino has given a lot to Spurs. Spurs have given a lot to Pochettino, of course. A new contract was signed recently, and it's logical that that was done because everybody's getting a new contract. That means that the manager as well, the one who's made this special, had to pay to the level that he deserved. Doesn't mean that that's a contract to be kept until the end, because right now what I feel is that both Pochettino and Spurs have given everything to each other. It doesn't mean either that he's going to leave, because I've got the impression that Levy realizes that the post-Pochettino era will be difficult, very, very difficult. So neither Levy or Pochettino are at a stage where they can decide what happens next. You'll have to see what happens with the Premier League, the Champions League, but do not be surprised, and I won't be surprised, and I believe it will happen. Manchester United will try to get Pochettino. So after that, it'll be a matter of convincing Levy. You don't talk to Pochettino before convincing Levy, because Pochettino will say to you, you have to convince Levy if you want this to happen. You hear everybody at Spurs, everybody's happy. but there is a frustration throughout the club. There is no money. You'll see it in the transfer window in January. There's no possibility of big signings. So it's about improving what Pochettino has, and he's done that this season. So it's a bit of a crossroads for Levy, for Pochettino, for Manchester United from that point of view. Do not be surprised if that link continues. But as I said, I don't think they're in a moment of deciding that yet, what happens next to the three of them. So we'll have to monitor that and keep an eye on all those things. But as I started at the beginning, I wasn't surprised that this step has been given by Manchester United. I was surprised that they actually went for Jose Mourinho with a little bit more of depth analysis of the situation, of the moment of the career of Jose Mourinho. Manchester United should have been a bit braver. We'll keep talking about all this because it is, of course, a fascinating 10 of events.